lot of battles out of those forts. It's no time to change. And I'm superstitious.
That, of course, President Trump yesterday announcing that 7 more Army bases would soon be getting new names. Those bases, once named after Confederate soldiers, were renamed during the Biden administration. Now the Trump administration is changing them back to their original names, sort of. Instead of honoring Confederates, the Pentagon is dedicating the bases to service members with the same name and a notable service record of their own. Our Jim Axelrod shows how that policy played out earlier this year at 2 military installations, Fort Bragg in North Carolina and Fort Benning in Georgia.
For the second time in less than 2 years, the largest U.S. military base has a new name.
Today we honor a hero worthy of the name Bragg.
The new name is also its old name, Fort Bragg, which for more than a century honored General Braxton Bragg, a Confederate general and slave owner. A ceremony in 2023 changed Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty. Then, last fall,
Should we change the name from Fort Liberty back to Fort Bragg?
Donald Trump made a promise that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth kept.
That's right. Bragg is back.
But not that Bragg. The Army found a much more palatable one. Private First Class Roland L. Bragg, a World War II Silver Star and Purple Heart recipient.
At first, I thought it was a joke.
Rebecca Amirpour and Jennifer Bell are Roland Bragg's granddaughters and plenty proud of their grandpa.
But if his name was Roland Jones,
Right.
I don't think we'd be sitting here.
No, we wouldn't.
While the military also sees Bragg as a brand, a place where some of the nation's fiercest warriors trained, it doesn't see any issue in the workaround that preserves the Bragg name. Gregory Anderson is the fort's commanding general.
To the extent that this was a painful name for people, what do you say to them?
Roland L. Bragg is someone that they can be proud of.
Do you feel it all used or manipulated?
I went through some different thoughts about it. I feel like using our grandfather's name is a way of bringing it back in a respectful way.
It's an absolute loophole.
Steve Moore's family is on the other end of the Army's renaming decision.
When I look back to my grandfather, between him, my father, myself, and my brother, we've got 110 years of service.
They were busting their buttons 2 years ago when the Pentagon changed Fort Benning, also named for a Confederate general, to Fort Moore. For both their father,
I have 2 battalions on this valley.
Lieutenant General Harold Moore, a highly decorated 32-year infantry commander, and their mother, Julia.
When your family found out that the original Fort Benning was going to become Fort Moore,
I broke down and cried, not because it was going to be named after Dad, but finally the Army was going to recognize the value of the military spouse.
But now, that too is being reversed and renamed for a corporal, Fred Benning, who served with honor for a couple of years during the First World War.
When I compare his short service in World War I to Mom and Dad's lifetime of service and everything they did and influenced, I have to ask the question, why?
There is no answer that will satisfy the family of Hal and Julia Moore, whose lifetime of valor and service to the Army lost out to a soldier who had one thing they did not: the right last name. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Fayetteville, North Carolina.
My thanks to Jim Axelrod, one of the best writers in our business. I'm joined here at the Conversation Corner by the Director of Foreign and Defense Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Kori Schake. She was also on the Biden-era commission that made recommendations on how the military could pivot from names linked to the Confederacy. It's so great to have you with us. Thanks for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
How do you regard this name change back and forth?
Well, it's disappointing. The legislation, the National Defense Authorization Act, that necessitated the name changes only required that you remove the names of Confederates, of people who voluntarily took up arms against the government. So President Trump was mistaken yesterday when he said he could rename a fort in honor of Robert E. Lee. That would require changing the legislation. But unless it's named for a Confederate, The Secretary of Defense has the authority to make those changes. It's just, I think Mr. Moore's comments were really touching about what it meant to honor his father and his mother who had contributed so much to the Army.
It seems like the administration, the current one, is just looking for a way to erase what the previous administration did and the work that you did carrying out the directives of this legislation.
I think that's right, yeah.
Is that how it feels to you?
Yeah, I think the commission was really proud of the work that we did. We spanned the spectrum from a sitting Republican congressman from Georgia to a liberal academic who wrote a book about his revelations about Confederate statues. And we came up with decision rules to prioritize people we hoped soldiers would take inspiration from. Medal of Honor recipients, people who'd fought in recent wars, more non-commissioned and enlisted soldiers rather than high-ranking soldiers. And we came up with a wonderful group, but there are lots of Americans that can be celebrated in this way.
So critical of the administration on this score, writing recently in The Atlantic, less critical of the coming parade to honor the Army, which many, not many, but some have said might look too militaristic, might give off a kind of visual whiff of authoritarianism. You're saying, calm down, it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, I think the Trump administration is giving us lots of things to be genuinely worried about. I don't think a military parade on the Army's 250th birthday is one of those things. I don't doubt that the president will behave badly, as he behaved badly yesterday at Fort Bragg, as he behaved badly giving the West Point commencement address, as he behaved badly on Memorial Day. But this is also an opportunity to celebrate the 0.5% of Americans who choose military service. And what I know from the book Jim Madison and I wrote about civil-military relations several years ago is that the strongest correlate for somebody choosing to join the American military is familiarity. It's being part of a military family. It's living close to a military base. So giving more Americans exposure to our military is good for recruiting because soldiers are great.
And you write in The Atlantic, look, just because it's a Trump administration initiative doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad idea. And not only for recruitment, but a sense of genuine cross-generational pride in sacrifice and service, at least represented by the United States Army.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, Americans have been at war for 25 years in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, and elsewhere. And the young men and women who have borne that burden on our behalf deserve to be celebrated by the rest of us.
Rand Paul said yesterday that his feeling about it was, in our country, we looked at other nations that had big military parades and sort of said, that's too much. He would not make this choice. Is there any danger for the Trump administration in that regard with this particular Army-centric spectacle?
I think a lot of people understandably feel that way, right? That big military parades are what the Soviet Union and North Korea do, not what a country founded in fear of a standing army like ours does. But the good news is the United States, Americans don't need to be afraid of our military. And that's a good thing. And I think that will come through from the soldiers who are participating in the parade, even if it doesn't come through from the president.
Kori Schake, I appreciate your perspective very much. Thanks so much for coming in.